Hello and welcome to More Than a Game, a podcast about the A-League, Premier League and more. My name's Tommie C and we are back. It's been a little while, but we're back for our A-League season review pod. One of our most popular every year. One of my favourites to actually record. I'm really looking forward to it today. Mega panel today on a mega pod. We've got Colby joining us. How are you doing today, Colby?
Hey, mate. Happy to be back. Don't remember. I say this every time, but don't remember the last time we recorded a podcast. But happy to be here. And hi again to all the listeners and welcome back.
G'day, Damo. No video footage. Apparently, you've got Sydney just everywhere at the moment. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I'm very high on Sydney FC at the moment. So I'll keep the camera off because no one wants to see that.
Destination second child.
Sha, how are you today, mate?
Yeah, can't complain. Doing well. I spruced up the background a bit since I usually get complaints about the boring white background. So I hope the 5 people watching enjoy.
Mate,
that's an ambitious view account there, Shannon.
Yeah. I like the neutrality that you're showing this time. After in the preview app, you wore the Sydney jersey for the first half and the Wanderers jersey for the second half. It's a different sort of spin on neutrality this time around, and I'm vibing it.
Yeah, I'm always trying to mix things up, keep it fresh.
Lovely. And last but not least, Mikey, how you doing today, mate?
Look, I've been better. I won't lie to you. I had a pretty big one last night as well to try to forget the game I'm about to help you guys review. But yeah. Look, all things considered, I'm pretty good.
Look, maybe that's a good way for us to jump off and segue into the first topic for tonight's pod, which is yesterday or last night's A-League Grand Final. Obviously, a little bit interesting in the lead up to this one, with obviously a blank weekend between the second semi-final and the grand final being played with no A-League All-Stars game. Also meant that there was a bit of a dud in terms of the what was it called? Our Festival of Football as well. Sorry, thank you for helping me out there. But look, in terms of the actual match, I thought, at least for the first sort of 60 or 70 minutes, this one was really exciting. It finished Melbourne City 1, Central Coast 6. Boys, has there been a better story in the A-League than this Cumdog-inspired Mariners team winning the grand final this season? Colby?
I mean, Tommie, I sat through the match last night, and I say sat through. It was an excellent game, but I still can't believe that the Mariners have won the league, won the grand final. It's just insane to me, how many times this team won the wooden spoon, how many times they were down and out. There was new lows every season. But yeah, the story of Cumdog coming back, we were all talking about it in the group chat, and there was plenty of talk about it on social media. How he was at a low ebb in his career, just as the club was, and the turnaround for both over the past 2 years has just been absolutely incredible. And I think we probably, it's obviously very good and very recent, but it's just that it's what we needed after what we've been through post World Cup in the sort of Australian football community, I guess. So yeah, it's the good news story. How good it was, I guess, is debatable and subject to a bit of recency bias, but gee, it was needed.
Yeah. I think it's definitely the best Mariners related content since you remember how there was that 3 or 4 year run where they were getting either wooden spoons or coming second last, and just the meme of them just digging even deeper and deeper and deeper. That meme, man, just still sticks with me 5-6 years later, right? But boys, obviously I thought the Mariners were fantastic pretty much all across the pitch, just winning one-on-one battles, just more intensity, just wanted it more. But Mikey, I'll throw to you for this one. Do you think City coach Rado ended up getting this one a bit wrong?
Well, clearly. I mean, I was about to give a more considered answer there, but yeah, we lost 6 goals to 1. So yeah, he got it very wrong. I mean, I was nervous from the start. I've been a bit wary of Nuno Reis for a few months now. I'm not sure I would have started him necessarily, but look, if I could go back slightly, we were talking about this narrative of this feel-good story. They finished second in the league. I know it's a great story, but people are talking about Port have just won the FA Cup. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not the Ewoks beating the Empire, mate. Like, this is second first, and they beat us 6-1. Like,
it could happen in a one-off game, yeah.
Look, 2 weeks of that David versus Goliath peddling has kind of made me a bit on edge, but
the little club that could, Mikey. What about it?
The little club that could, the little club that did. Like, congratulations, Mariners. You've done it. But my lord, the amount of underdog card playing this has been in the whole lead up. I understand it, but we're still talking about the underdog. They scored 6 goals in the grand final. But yeah, I needed to get that out. So if anyone else wants to talk about the game, feel free to jump in.
I want to put the game to one side and just explore that analogy a little bit more of Mariners being the Ewoks and Melbourne City being the Empire. And
let's dig into that.
Yeah, I've got this mental image of the cum dog.
Is this now Star Wars
in like a bear suit? Yeah,
Star Wars is back.
Is this some Short King hate on Nisbet?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Give the man a break.
Oh shit. I've lost it now. But I did look, I really enjoyed that. But look, I don't know. I'm in two minds. I think as Colby said, like this team has been, with the exception of probably the last 2.5 seasons, 3 seasons, has been absolutely garbage for going back as far as about 8 years. And for them to have turned it around and changed that culture across 2 separate managers, with Stajic and Monty, for them to have grown the playing group sort of consistently over the last couple of years, for them to have then taken on the evil empire that I think the analogy fits for City. Rado obviously is the Emperor Palpatine, which I'd rate that as well. But I don't know. I'd lean into it because I think the other aspect of City that I've kind of been thinking about a little bit lately is whether it's Melbourne City or Manchester City, is that there's a lack of soul that comes with both of those teams, and I guess it's the total opposite when it comes to the Mariners. Like there's just such a feel good vibe around them. They say that they're a family club. They take on board all of these players, whether it's Marco Tullio or the cum dog that have had all of these problems in the last couple of years, and like Sam Silvera, McGarry, just guys that like have pretty much been rejects everywhere else, or just
Theo
like,
Mares.
careers. Yeah, exactly. And what's his name? Wenzel Hall, even, and just guys where like this shouldn't work. Like they shouldn't be as competitive as they are. But I'm not sure where they're at in terms of. You remember a couple of years ago they weren't spending their whole cap. I don't know if that's still the case or not.
They just play players. They pay their players in vibes rather than cash.
And not to mention getting rid of some of their best players in those 2 seasons that they came good as well, Tommie. You've got to remember they had Kai Rolls and Garen Qual and even Alu Qual as well. Like and Bazanic in the midfield. Like they had all these players that went out, and when Stajic went out, we were like, what's going to happen now? And each time one of those players or new manager, as it were, came in, you're just kind of going, yeah, this sort of like vibe, I guess, that they've got, and this run that everyone thought they're on, surely that's got to stop. And it just kept going and getting better and better. And that's got to be testament to the club, right? And in large part to Monty.
It's crazy to me to think that this is the same club that I think it would have only been 4 or 5 years ago. They were wheeling out Usain Bolt in some preseason trial matches, and it seemed like, probably in my opinion, aside from the New Zealand Knights and Gold Coast United fiascos, it seemed like one of the lowest ebbs an A-League club had ever had. It seemed real dire, to be a Mariners fan at this time, when essentially they were having a celebrity player come potentially play for the club, They were like finishing bottom of the table. The fans were starting to abandon them. Things looked really dire. So the fact that we're now talking about them as A-League champions is really incredible. And you mentioned the Cum Dog and this sort of story where he come in and he was at a real low point of his career and probably a real low point mentally. It might just be fresh in my mind because I'm currently writing about it, but it reminds me a lot of Thomas Broich, who come to the A-League. I think he was only 29. He pretty much was ready to walk away from the game due to depression. He had a few bad years in the Bundesliga because of personal problems. He come to Australia, fell in love with the lifestyle, fell in love with the culture, and found his football form again. So to me, I know it's a big comparison because Thomas Broich is one of the legends of the A-League, but to me, Jason Cummings really reminds me a lot of that story, and it's a real shame the fact that he's built this reputation and he's got this whole culture with the Mariners and he's brought a lot of fans. It's a real shame that he's going to India now.
Yeah, and it seemed it's probably a good segue, right? Because it seemed like it was unofficial all week that he was leaving. The grand final was going to be his final game at the Mariners, and then on the coverage they were saying, "Yep, this is his last game. This is his last game." So it all felt very official by the end of the game.
Well, they said "Cum Dog Millionaire" on the broadcast.
I think
Right,
he
that's official.
announced. I think he announced on the live broadcast in a pre-game interview that it was going to be his last game, and then it just sort of turned into the Cum Dog party.
And like you said, Damo, to Shannon's point about it's disappointing he's going to India. Totally agree. But Damo, in the chat when we were talking about this last night, you were saying, it's actually he's gone out on a high. He's gone out before his sort of brand goes stale. Like if he has a bad season next year or whatever, he's just gone out at his absolute peak. And obviously with the hat trick in the grand final, just could not be a better way to do it. But obviously in terms of the timing of the season and where he is and the hype around him, and he's come in and got just had his career revived, embraced Australia, become a Socceroo. It couldn't have gone better.
Yeah, everything he left Scotland for, he achieved. He left to go and play regular football and win, and he did. He left to go and represent Australia and go to a World Cup, and he did. And now he gets to leave having known he's achieved all of that, and he gets to go and get a good pay packet for the last couple of years of his career. So good on him.
Yeah, boys, I guess if we can keep moving, though, I mentioned the festival football, which sort of was a bit of a false start this week. A lot of that was largely due to the lack of an All-Stars game, which would have been played last weekend, I think. Do you guys think this festival football works, even without a gap for the All-Stars game, if there is no All-Stars game?
No, I don't think it works if there is Bayern Munich coming to Accor Stadium or whatever. I think the markets they're trying to go for, they're not the same market. The people that will go to the A-League All-Stars as Bayern Munich are not the people that will the Sunday after, or the Saturday after rather, go and watch Melbourne City host Central Coast at Western Sydney. Like, they're not the same markets, and you're not going to attract those people to the A-League. It doesn't help the A-League to have the game in Sydney. It's a farce all over. But they spectacularly screwed up the festival of football. Yeah.
100%. I remember Barcelona come last year, and while waiting for the game, I pretty much got the opportunity to chat to a lot of fans because I was media on that game, and I was excited to see kind of fans go, I might check out the A-League. I enjoyed seeing the A-League All-Stars. I was like, that was my story that I was potentially going to do, but the amount of fans I chatted to, I think probably 95% said they had no interest in going to the A-League. Some of them didn't even have an A-League team, even though the A-League All-Stars almost beat Barcelona. They were saying the quality was bad, this and that. So Mikey's 100% right. It's not the market that's going to transfer into the A-League. It would be nice to see, a scenario where that could happen. But unfortunately, at this stage, there's a big divide between people who watch European football and people who watch the A-League. And to be able to bridge that gap is going to be more than a festival of football, in my opinion.
For me, that divide that you referred to, Sha, I think that's really challenging how we breach that. And for people to have watched an All-Stars game who, if they don't follow the A-League, for them to have watched that All-Stars game against Barcelona where the All-Stars, who don't play together, actually did very, very well, to walk away from that and say, oh, the standard's terrible. Like, I don't know how you could draw that conclusion. Like, I guess for me, it's they're not objectively actually making an assessment. It's crystallized in their own minds.
It's complete perception. It's perception only. Yeah.
Yeah. So that for me, I guess, is really disappointing. And I guess it begs the question: will an All-Stars game actually change the minds of people about the quality of the league? And if that answer's no, then how like what are other strategies that we can do to bridge that divide? Because that may not be the silver bullet that the APL is hoping that it will be. All right, boys, let's get on to, I guess, some broader themes and discussion regarding the season that was, though. And I guess some of it's linked. My first question is linked back to just, I guess, a general point about the league, and I guess it has been a season of two halves. Like you had sort of the pre-World Cup season, and then the post World Cup and post Grand Final announcement part of the season, and they both had two very, very different feels. One was one half was very optimistic and people were excited about the World Cup, and then obviously the second half of the season has taken on a very different vibe. As the whole, though, would you say that you've enjoyed this A-League season, considering the two halves of it, though? Damo?
Yeah, look, I really enjoyed a lot of the games. I thought the quality of the football in the A-League this year was some of the best games that I've watched in a long time. Really end-to-end games, great tactical battles. But what I didn't enjoy was I found it hard to stay engaged with the competition and with all the talk around it, and it just sort of made me distance myself a bit from the culture of the league. But I kept finding myself going back and really enjoying the games, and that's what kept me watching the A-League. That's the only thing that kept me watching the A-League this season, was I was really enjoying the football. I wasn't enjoying everything else that came with it, though.
That and A-League fantasy.
Yeah, and A-League fantasy really did really did help keep people engaged, particularly me, because I started well, and when you start well, you keep going. So it kept me really engaged until probably the last sort of 6 weeks of the season. I really sort of fell off.
Damo's spot on. I 100% agree. I think we've seen some of the best football we've seen in years in terms of on the pitch. But did I enjoy the A-League this season? Not at all. Like at the start of the season, yes, I did. But the whole culture around the A-League, I know it's always been a little bit toxic here and there, but it just got so toxic and personally just drained me so much. It seemed like just such a negative thing towards the end of the season to be an A-League fan. And it's quite a shame because it's, not to do with anything on the pitch. It's all off the field stuff. And to be honest, I think many people have probably been turned off to A-League just simply due to all the off the pitch stuff, which obviously we're probably going to talk about. It's the big elephant in the room. And it's just such a shame because, again, the football was incredible at times this season.
Sha, that's a good point, and I guess I've made a bit of an editorial decision not to go into some of the detail around some of the low points of the season because,
it's already been talked about enough.
To some degree, yes, but also because, like, Damo and I were at the Melbourne Derby, right? Like the now infamous Melbourne Derby. Like we sat through it, we lived it, and a bit like how now, sort of a couple of years later, there's no sort of COVID-related media or content. I don't know. I just don't want to make a podcast about how shit like that Melbourne Derby was, if you know what I mean, right?
Too soon.
So yeah, exactly. Still too soon, boys. One thing I did want to talk on, and that's something that we've sort of lamented for the last couple of years, was the lack of a magazine show. And one has sort of not necessarily a magazine show, but there was a panel show that was created midway through this season. I think it was about 8 or 9 rounds in that Simon Hill's show on Channel 10, Round Ball Rules, appeared. Most of the time, I think it was just the 3 panelists, usually Simon Hill and 2 others. I wanted to see, I guess, your the collective opinion on that show. If people have watched it, if people have enjoyed it, if people have felt like because it's not on Keep Up, it's specifically Channel 10 content, that it's just not something that they've got around. But interested to hear more. Colby?
I don't think I've ever heard of this show, Tommie.
I didn't even know it existed until you dropped it in the run sheet. So,
TIL.
Yeah, I mean,
and if anyone's going to know, it's going to be us who are, ingrained in the league. And how is this reaching audiences of people, even, sort of on the fringes of watching the A-League?
I was worried. I thought, like, oh God, I don't know this show. I hope somebody else has seen the show.
Have you watched it, Tommie? Is it good?
So, admittedly, I have. I watched probably about the first 5 or 6, I reckon, and it was good. It sort of. I think the problem with the show was that, like, objectively, it wasn't bad. It was like a well-produced show. They had Simon Hill and other sort of knowledgeable panelists on there as well, so the discussion was good. I guess it felt like there was, and kind of we're picking up on one of the problems with it. There wasn't a lot of cut through in the broader sort of A-League media around it, right? So like there wasn't like a 1-minute clip of like what someone had said, and then there was sort of that was generating further discussion, right? It just felt like it was happening sort of in parallel to the rest of sort of soccer Twitter and A-League discussion, right? Which is really strange.
Some clickbaity interview with Townsend baiting the fans or something like that they could use to really get that cut through that you want.
Why that man? So I know we said we're not going to get into any of this, but why that man continued to do interviews? Like all he had to do was shut up. Like there's nothing he can say. No. Anything he says is just pouring more fuel on the fire. Like
unless he's pivoting and he's going to come out and say something different. Yeah. Yeah. Totally, Mikey. Yeah.
Digging
the
in.
Only advertisement I've seen about that Simon Hill show, at first on the run sheet, again, like I didn't really know what it was. I thought you were talking about Alex Brosk, his show with Simon Hill.
Yeah, that's what I
which admittedly, I think I've only tuned into once.
That's just the SEN radio show.
I quite like that.
Yeah.
Sorry, you're right. That's a different one. That's what the Global Game, I think it is.
The Global Game.
That's it.
Which ironically, the only time I've ever tuned into SEN for the Simon Hill show was when Danny Townsend was on it.
Tommie.
That's like they got you at the clickbait interview that you were talking about.
Yep.
Keep going.
Works. Yeah, the only time I seen advertisement for Simon Hill's Round Ball Rules show, and again, I don't know if it was this show, it was Run the Memes posting about what Simon Hill's wearing, or like he looks like a rock star or something. I think from that show, I seen a photo of Simon wearing like a band t-shirt with the lovely long hair, the cool like necklace thing he's got going on some sort of couch. I'm assuming it was that show, but I've never seen it.
He is rocking some long hair nowadays, by the way. He does look like an aging rock star.
Yeah. Well, a good review of that show, Tommie. I'm sure that segment went as planned.
Hey, look, I still think, I still think there's a lot that's actually come out of that more than maybe what you realize. Boys, moving on though, we've talked a little bit about A-League fantasy already and how successful that was at sort of keeping you a little bit more engaged than you otherwise would have. We've talked on recently on, I think it was the last pod, about the success and failure of the A-League Access All Areas, or I can't remember which order those words are in, but you know that the content that I'm talking about. I wanted to, I guess, broadly bring up the idea of Keep Up and its other content that it's been producing. I know that they've done a bunch of interviews. I know that Daniel Garb does like a weekly podcast. I know Robbie Cornthwaite does like a secondary podcast, which is like sort of player-specific interviews.
That one's good.
Yeah, and I wanted to, I guess, get your feedback on what you thought of Keep Up as a content platform in its, I think this is its first full season or its second full season. Sha?
Personally, I don't read a lot of keep up content because I feel like it's become almost spam. I know that might be harsh, but I remember when Perpion made his debut for Brighton, constantly on my timeline, I think within a day there was about 15 posts, 15 photos about him. Photos of him in the Sydney FC shirt because he was part of their youth academy. And it felt like it was just clogging up my newsfeed. I do read articles that Roy O'Donovan puts out because personally, he and I get along and I like to support him. But aside from that, every time I've seen keep up on my timeline, it hasn't seemed to be something that engages me. It feels like more just spam, and oftentimes it's not really related to the A League. It's like this thing's vaguely related to the A League. This guy might have met an A League player or something like that.
I agree there. And one thing I say, like the amount of Postecoglou updates we get day on day from Keep Up is ridiculous. But I think Keep Up serves an important purpose and still does. There's such a chasm in the media covering football in the country that it makes sense that they do something like this, and it works perfectly fine when everything's going well. But when you have most of your fan base offside and these people are employed by the league and have to keep talking and trying to make everything happy and ignore all these elephants in the room, it becomes very quickly, you just see right through it. So I think it works. Yeah, you go.
Yeah, I think you're about to say this, Mikey, but yeah, imagine in a parallel universe if there wasn't the Destination New South Wales decision and the Melbourne Derby incident, I think we'd be sitting here singing a very different song about the keep up content, because I totally agree with what you're saying. I think I see what they're doing, and I think it's the right decision, and I think we need this content. I think there's a huge gap to fill in the mainstream media, and I think they will have some cut through, if not already, with some of it. But yeah, I just think I'm certainly not engaging with it that much, but I think that says more about where the sort of state of the league and everyone's engagement is at the moment. Maybe in the future, I think, but I do like it, Tommie, and I think it's they'll get it right, and I think we'll ultimately see that it will be quite a good thing.
I just want to throw out, I guess, Garby's pod I thought has been really good this year. Robbie Cornthwaite's pod, the ones that I've listened to, and I don't listen to all of them, but the ones I've listened to have been fantastic. The one person that out of the sort of stable of keep up writers and content producers, the one who has stood out to me is James Dodd. He's not someone that I've really paid much attention to in the A-League. I don't know how long he's been around the A-League or Australian football in general. Yeah, I think it's been a couple of years, but I don't think it's been, sort of 5 or more. Yeah, but have been I really enjoyed his perspective, and just thought he added a lot to Garby's pod, which sometimes can be just a little bit of an Australian football sort of love fest, or I don't know. But really enjoyed his addition to, I guess, the keep up stable. Felt like he's been a welcome addition. But boys, all right, let's get into some of the award categories that were handed out at the Dolan Warren Awards this week as part of the Festival of Football. Player of the season, I don't think was hugely surprising to a lot of people. World Cup Craig, he took out the Johnny Warren medal with Borello and J-Mac close behind. Do you guys think that was about right, or did you think it should have been closer in terms of the vote count?
I mean, you'd be hard pressed to argue against Craig Goodwin. I know if Leckie stayed fit, it might have been a bit closer, but we're not talking, ifs. It's the whole season. Craig Goodwin was fit the whole season. He played well the whole season. And anyone who, is arguing against him, I know a few people have argued for Borello, who had a good season, but you can't,
not the whole season,
really. Yeah, exactly. You can't really argue against Craig Goodwin because he was just consistently good the whole season. I think I remember 2 games where he was a bit underwhelming. Aside from that, he's been a standout.
Yeah,
I think individually, he's the difference between Adelaide challenging for the title like they did and making finals. You take him out of that squad, it's completely different. So he's so important to them, and you can see why he gets all those votes for sure.
I think you could see as well, like when he wasn't physically at his best late in the season, how they started to struggle, and obviously they made it through the first week the first week of the finals against the Knicks, but the Knicks were terrible, right? They almost didn't deserve to be playing finals the way they turned out in that elimination final. But I guess the flip side was that you can't make a case that Adelaide deserved to continue on past the Mariners. They got pretty much blown away in Gosford. So, and that was largely due to Goodwin not necessarily playing particularly well in those two legs either.
On the other winner on the female side, I do want to say I feel like Hannah Keane could feel a little bit hard done by, because I didn't watch every game, but every game I watched with her, she was just a standout in a Western United team who were pretty much predicted to finish towards the bottom, and they ended up surprising everyone, and she was a key player. So, like, I feel like she could feel pretty hard done by not coming closer to winning it, if not winning the Julie Dolan medal.
Yeah.
In terms of the young player of the season, I actually thought this one was far closer than the player of the season. I'm not sure if they released the actual voting stats for this, but still, I thought there were at least 4 standout candidates. You had Geordie Boss, Marco Tilio, Irankunda, and Triantis. They were the 4 that stood out to me. I'm not sure if anyone else had any others that they thought were a good shout for young player of the season. Anyone?
Neuenhoff. Without a doubt, I'll talk about it in the Western Sydney Wanderers review, but he was pretty much a transformative player. He was the heartbeat of their midfield for such a young player. The way he created space and the way he covered space on and off the ball, for someone who only had a handful of games and had like injury-ridden few seasons before, that was just incredible to see how well he did. And Keegan Jelicic, my man, like, he pretty much come from nowhere and took the absolute piss, and he's deserved to move to Belgium.
Two really good shouts there. I guess that's the thing about Neuenhoff, is that a lot of people either thought that he was older or had just not really considered him. And even sort of 5 games in, everyone was going, geez, he had a great start to the season, and expected him to sort of fade as the season wore on. But he was so
leading
consistent.
the Johnny Warren medal at one point.
Unreal. I've said it how before, that one of the most satisfying things about the A-League is that you have these young players come through, and you sort of get that first glimpse of them. And maybe it's the football hipster in me that enjoys that part of sort of seeing like them being your boy and saying, oh, I saw him first, kind of thing. But it still remains one of the most satisfying parts of the A-League, and seeing Geordie Boss, who ended up going on to win the Young Player of the Season award, watching him pretty much week in, week out, and going from just a guy that's, he's doing all right in the first sort of half a dozen games, to a guy that was really solid and consistent, and one of arguably the best players. Yeah, one of the best players in the league, arguably, not just young player, but overall, throughout the course of the season. And then see him get like a big move overseas was just really satisfying to see. We're not sure where some of those other names that I mentioned are headed. I think Marco Tilio is headed overseas. We don't know where. Irankunda obviously was mentioned about going to Bayern Munich. Triantis looks like he's off to Sunderland. That's emerged in the last day or so. So just really exciting. Whether or not Neuenhoff actually stays in the A-League, I think he's only on like an academy deal. How that's like legal is still a little bit beyond me, because
that's robbery. That is absolute robbery.
And look, I can kind of understand why he would have accepted it. Like, he was such a risk, right, coming off that ACL injury, that I can kind of understand why they wouldn't have wanted to even just put like a regular sort of squad contract on him. But for him to have made it halfway through the season, or even the whole way through the season, and still be on an academy deal,
give the man a new deal.
Yeah. Like, I'm almost surprised that halfway through the season he wasn't locked down to one, so that someone didn't swoop in. And because I imagine if he's on an academy deal, someone could have just picked him up midway through. Like, does that not sound right to you guys? I don't know. Anyway, So the young player of the season was Geordie Boss. Did anyone feel like it should have been someone else?
I don't think so. If you're fetching 2 million, $2 million to get an overseas move, I think that speaks volumes. How many young players that have been really impressive have we seen go overseas on a free? The fact that a club is willing to pay 2 million to get this player, like they're going to be playing Geordie, and I'm so excited to see what's coming for him in the next few years.
He's our Socceroos left back for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
He's an unreal talent.
Yep.
Fantastic.
Another thing to mention, he got his call up. The Ecuador game at Marble Stadium too. That's another big moment for him. Yeah.
Another big tick in the box. Boys, the only other thing I wanted to mention before we get into check the tapes is manager of the season. And this is one where I thought there was a lot of very solid candidates for this one. Carl Viet ended up actually winning it, but I actually don't think he was the most deserving candidate. And I think there's probably at least 3 and a joint candidate that I think could have also taken this one out. So I think Monty is obviously the clear standout, having taken the big the Ewoks to defeat the Empire in the grand final yesterday. So I think you can make a very strong case that he deserved to have won manager of the season. Finished above Adelaide, knocked them out in the semi-finals to then go into
those ragtag bunch of misfits.
I had sticks. It was sticks against lasers. I think Tommie have some ineligibility or something for this, and that's why he didn't get it? Am I misremembering something? I think there was like he got a red card, or there was some reason why Monty couldn't be given the award.
I thought it might have been
out on the manager of the month because of a red card. I think he missed out on April's manager of the month because he got a red card, which was in February or something, and there was a lot of vitriol on Twitter about that. So whether or not that was what actually contributed to it I don't know. But if it is, that's a bit strange because just because a player gets a red card, for example, doesn't mean they haven't had a fantastic season. Same with a manager.
It's a bit odd.
I thought you were getting at that, like he wasn't tall enough, or he was too furry, or something like that. But boys, the other candidates that I thought were Marco Rudin obviously had a fantastic season with the Wanderers, took them to the finals for the first time in 10 years or whatever it was. The other 2 candidates, both of them had me, I guess, eating. I can't remember what the expression is, but had me, I guess, questioning earlier predictions. So Ruben Zadkovic, I thought, did an outstanding job given the circumstances at Perth, and it's since been announced that he's going to be departing there for other opportunities, whatever that means.
Yeah, he wants to just hit some other players at a different club.
He resigned.
Yeah. Mutual consent.
I thought Perth were going to absolutely stink it up for them to have almost made finals. I think was a monumental achievement by Ruben Zadkovic, and had me questioning some of those earlier decisions. The other one that I do want to mention, and this is where I guess we were getting at Colby before, was I actually think Nick Green and Warren Moon did an outstanding job with the Raw this year for them to almost make finals. After I said that they were also going to stink it up, I think I actually think their squad was worse than Perth's. I thought that they were like stone cold going to finish last.
I'll let you get in a second, Sha, but like I hate to break it to you, Tommie, but everyone almost made finals.
Yeah,
look true.
I mean,
look true. But
top 6
still,
did you finish in the top half of the entire teams playing?
But it was very close too. Like it was like this season was probably the closest. I mean, I don't actually have this stat in front of me, but I've got a strong feeling that it was probably the closest between the bottom finisher and like making finals that we've had in recent history. It was very, very close all the way through, from the spoon right to finals, because Brisbane were like within a matter of like 2 game weeks fighting to make finals or avoid wooden spoon.
It did feel like that. Like throughout the season, you'd have like Sydney FC, they're nearly at the bottom of the table. They'd go and get 1 win, and it's like, oh, gee, they're suddenly right back in the 6. It's like, well, what's happening?
Yeah, it was a season that was a bit like that. So look, fair enough if you want to take my points with a bit of grain of salt, but still, I think for Warren Moon and slash Nick Green and Ruben Zadkovich to be competitive, I thought still was an incredible achievement in pretty average squads, and also noting the stadium issues that both clubs also had, which we'll get to in a little bit further detail.
Go on, Shannon. Let him have it.
So I'm very, very unwell, so I'm not sure if I hallucinated it or not, but did you just say Warren Moon is a candidate for manager of the season, or did I just imagine that in a delirium?
No, mate, I'm standing by it.
We need to check the tapes
Fair
for
enough.
season review now.
Can I
Oh,
just
God.
say quickly, what is Tony Popovich? Can he get an award for somehow keeping his job and getting everyone else sacked?
Well, he's
Speaking of
kept his
stealing a
job
living,
so far.
Sorry, Sha?
He's kept his job so far, but you never know what's
Yeah.
going to happen in the
He
A-League.
somehow got everyone else
Ooh.
fired in the process. I don't know.
He
I don't
might
know
end
what-
up back at Perth in 2 weeks, knowing the A-League, crazy merry-go-round they have.
And then 3 weeks later, back in the Turkish third division or something.
Although I don't think Andy Keogh would be too keen on helping him get back to Perth,
Don't think he'd be too KO. Alrighty, that's probably any good reason to move on, shall we? Though obviously, check the tapes is one of our favourite segments here at More Than a Game. It's a good
I'm
way
dreading
to
this.
yeah, you should be, mate. But it is a good way for us all to stay accountable for some of our honking predictions and the things that we say throughout the preview, but also, I guess, sometimes throughout the season as well. But look, here is we'll got our first one now. First one is Damo.
Of course.
Here's
Who else would it
Damo,
be?
and Damo always gives us plenty of great content for Check the Tape. So here's Damo first up. For premiers and champions.
I am predicting Melbourne Victory to finish top of the league and win the premiership this season.
The double.
And I'm actually predicting Western United to win the grand final again.
Ooh. Wowie.
Oh,
wow.
Look, in my
that's
defense,
fast.
It was opposite
out of
day.
all of the predictions that we got, only one person didn't predict Melbourne Victory to win the league. So
you just happened to be the one that actually said it on the pod and captured that. So sorry,
I'll take
Damo,
that.
but you're the one carrying the can. Next up, we've got Shannon talking about his boy Dwight York.
No.
Oh, rip.
I want to apologise to Dwight York. I was very harsh on him when he got, announced as manager. I thought he was just announced for his name. He probably was, but he's turned out to be a decent man manager and a decent manager. And the Bulls have kind of, they've always had really good players. They've always been a decent side ever since they've been in the league. But shit, they look like they're only in
like a bull in a china shop.
first or second. They look like they're not even close to their peak, and they're looking really dangerous. They got good defense, they got good keepers, and I'm honestly, the sky's the limit with where this side can go. And honestly, if Dwight York can't get them into the top 2, I'll redact that apology. But I honestly think they're going to get top 2. They're one of the better sides, I think.
Oh wow, that was hard to listen to when I was doing the prep for this. It doesn't get any
I guess
easier.
I have to redact that apology to Dwight York, and I will, re-say that I think he isn't the right choice for MacArthur manager.
I still can't believe that wasn't true.
I think
Like,
we
I'm
were all
listening to that
running a
now.
bit
I'm like,
high.
Shannon's making a lot of sense.
We're running a bit high on MacArthur juices because they won the FFA Cup or Australia Cup or whatever it's called. They look like they could have been a good chance, and geez, it really come unraveled for them. And Dwight York, I cringed when I said he was a good man manager because we all know what happened. He allegedly called the team a pub team and walked out at half time, which that's not good man management. So I thought I was going to have some bad cases to answer on this pod, and I completely forgot about that one. That was a shocking call, and it's a big fat L for me.
I think there's more from the MacArthur management with that, though. Like, wasn't there things about players being released before games? I think his pub team comments more directed at the whole club, really. Who knows? If they had a more competent team, maybe Dwight York would be in number 2 in the grand final, beating us 6-1. Who knows?
Anthony Carter come out and said he was told by the owner, I believe, that he was not going to continue on the team bus to a game. And allegedly, I've got to say, he was in tears, and it brought down the whole mood of the team. And hearing stuff like that's never nice. But geez, I'm trying to not defend my call, so it's a shocking call. I'm just going to take the L.
Don't you love how many managers in our league have an allegedly story about them now? It's it seems to be almost every team.
They're growing.
I mean, some more serious than others, but we'll move on.
And Warren Moon is allegedly the candidate for manager of the year too. So,
boys, here's me drinking the Jets Kool-Aid. I wrote down a few, but I'm only going to name one. I'm just going to say that I think the Wanderers and the Jets are going to go big this year. I think they're going to finish 3rd and 4th, respectively. Which I don't know if that's actually that bolder prediction or not. Yeah, look, that's pretty much as bold as I think I went in this year's preview ep. I think I was doing a lot of hosting, facilitating, and throwing out dodgy takes.
I love that you doubled down on your prediction there too, by saying that they were both going to go well, and then saying, I don't even know if that is bold.
Yeah. Boys, here's Sha as well, drinking a little bit of Jets Kool-Aid. Oh. Anyone other than Jamie McLaren for the Golden Boot?
Oh, no. I know what this one is.
Yeah. I think Mikkel Tadzi, he looked a better player last season than McLaren. And I don't mind McLaren. I'm a fan of McLaren, but Mikkel Tadzi looked a better player. If he has Renault Piscopo firing behind him, he could, get the Golden Boot, in my opinion.
Oof. Where's the lie? Where's the lie? Reno Piscopo was a dud. Mikkel Tadzi got sold short, I think, and he did look better than Macca most of the time last year. I don't see the problem, Sha.
Mikkel Tadzi.
Apart from the bit where he said that he'd win the Golden Boot.
Yeah.
Mikkel Tadzi also, I swear, he would be turning up constantly at left fullback to receive the ball, and every time I saw it, I go, "Why are you there? What are you doing?"
Oh, that was a shocking call. To be fair, I tried to think through before I say these calls, apply a bit of logic to it. But man, I thought you were going to bring up some other calls. I forgot about that one. Jeez, I'm sorry, J Mac. I owe you an apology.
And look, I'm going to finish with one for Mikey. Mikey, I think, gets off a little bit easy here. Obviously not quite as easy as Colby does, but here's Mikey anyway.
Okay, I'm going out on a limb here, and it really depends on results going my way. I'm going to say, Steve Corica, you're gone mid-season, mate. I don't reckon they're going to do very well this season, and I don't reckon Sydney FC or their fans are going to stand for that. And I reckon halfway through the season, when they're sitting in 10th, they're going to let him go.
Interesting.
I agree, Mikey, you stole mine, and I was going to go with it's going to be the Sydney Derby in November that almost could bury Corica's job.
Yeah, and look, I mean, like I say, Mikey gets off pretty easy there because everything he was saying was correct. Like, he was under enormous pressure pretty much the whole season. He just missed the part about Corica actually getting sacked. Yeah, so it's still going to go down as a dodgy take.
I misstepped on thinking the Sydney fans had standards and wouldn't accept things.
Well, I mean, to be fair to Sydney fans, I think they actually did want to get rid of him. It's just the board just waited and just never pulled the trigger.
Yeah. Anyway. I don't know how he has a job. I'll stand by that call.
Okay, boys. All right, let's we'll get into now our club by club reviews. So we're going to be doing this club by club in reverse alphabetical order after doing it in alphabetical order in the preview app. So we're going to be doing each team's finish from last season compared with this season, what we loved and hated about them this season, highlight and or low light of their season, pass or fail from the squad and or manager, and what to look out for over the off season. So I'm up first with the Woo. And so look, as far as last season goes, they finished second and won the grand final against Melbourne City. This year, though, a bit disappointing. They finished seventh, but for about 80% of the campaign, they were around 10th to 12th. So finished strong and could have snuck into finals, but just missed out. What I hated about this season was that just so many of their players seemed utterly bereft of form. Leo Lacroix's drop-off was particularly spectacular. He scored 3 own goals. He was sent off once.
What was that about?
I don't understand still to this day how someone can go from being like everyone was saying he was like the Swiss Virgil van Dijk, and then all of a sudden he was just like he couldn't play a straight pass. You're like, what is going on? Still just absolutely blows me away to this day. Topple Stanley also got 2 reds. Just as a club, like on the pitch, were just a genuine disaster class all round constantly. In terms of low light, there was lots of them, pretty much whenever Leo Lacroix touched the ball. But also, I thought the lack of Diamante throughout most of the season just was a bit sad. I know he's gone on retired now, but it just felt like he was sort of fading into the background, unfortunately. And we still never got a Diamante access all areas, which just seems like a bit of a missed opportunity in my opinion. Highlight though, I thought the emergence of Noah Botic as a credible leader of a line for the Woo was a big positive, not only for the Woo, for him as a young player, but also potentially for the Socceroos as well. We don't have a lot of genuine number 9s to play up front, and Botic, I think, has sort of entered that conversation, provided he continues to improve and continues to play well next season as well. In terms of pass or fail, big fail for the Woo this year. I would have thought making finals would have been maybe a pass to them after doing so well last year, but this year felt like, I guess, a bit of a return back to the mean for a club that probably overachieved last year. But genuinely, some of their performances this year were absolutely atrocious. What to look at for next season, though, the big rebuild, like many A-League clubs. The big news to come out of the Woo is that their training pitch is likely to be completed by the end of the off season. There's been some photos doing the rounds of the seating, the bleachers around the Woo's training pitch. So there's a very good chance, I think, this calendar year we'll see some official matches, whether they're Australia Cup or preseason friendlies or something like that, being played in front of crowds at Tarnate, which is obviously is overdue, but it's just going to be fantastic, I think, for them to say we own this ground and we are playing matches there, because right now I think they're the only team that can actually say that they're doing that. And that's the Woo. So next up we have Sha with the Wanderers. So take it away, Sha.
Yeah, the season's finished compared to last season's finish. Night and day, pretty much. They were 3 points off, which is a win, away from second place. I feel like, if they were a bit more consistent, they potentially could have been in a grand final. What I really loved personally was the emergence of some of these younger players like Neuenhoff, but also some of these gems they brought from overseas. For example, Tom Beadling, he made his debut in a Sydney derby, chucked that centre back, did incredibly well. A lot of these young players
Was
that
robbed
Western
of a worldie of a debut goal too.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, that too.
That was a great
Like
debut.
a lot of these players Western Sydney brought in, whether it's a young player like Neuenhoff or an experienced guy like even a Schneiderlin who didn't have the best start, they all contributed. They all did really well. So that's what I really loved about the season. What I hated was it's a problem with the whole league, but the negativity regarding a lot of their fans, it got a bit grating at times. It got a bit I got a bit tired of it personally. It seemed very toxic, but again, that's the problem with the whole of the league. I just personally, I don't know if it was me just knowing more Western Sydney Wanderers fans or seeing more of it. I just personally felt like they were one of the bigger contributors. Highlight, obviously, I guess, would be Callum Neuenhoff. Without a doubt, he's, in my opinion, one of the most talented players in the whole league this season. To be able to get a player like him from your rivals, I know there was a lot of talk about Ninkovic, but to be able to get this young player who essentially his career needed a lifeline, to turn him into one of the best midfielders in the league, who they can potentially make a lot of money off, that's just a massive highlight and a massive, win for the club. Obviously, the low light would be losing. I think it was a quarter final against their rivals, Sydney FC. No one ever wants to do that. That was a bit of a bad way for their season to end.
It was
pass
also
or
sort of
fail?
like the Wanderers' best season in the last 10 years, and it was like
Yeah.
Sydney's worst season in 10 years. And so for Sydney to have eclipsed them, noting that additional context made it just so much worse for the Wanderers, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And all the talk pre-match about the boycotts and all this and that, all the it felt like it was a real big rivalry. I know it's always a rivalry because it's a Sydney derby, but I felt like there was extra in this match because of all of that. And to lose to Sydney FC, who didn't have a particularly great season, after having such a good season, it just felt like such a bad way to end the season, to be honest. And I want to give it a pass, but I don't think I can give it a pass or a fail. I think it's just kind of one of those ones that you can't say that losing to your rivals in a final, even though you did make the final, is a pass, but you can't say that they failed. So, you know, it's a bit of a fence sitter, but
Get
I
off the
guess what
fence,
to
mate.
look out. Yeah, I guess it's more of a pass than a fail. And what to look out for next season is they seem to have lost a few of these. I mentioned some of the older guys they brought in. Yenny's retired. No, sorry. And Malfitano's retired. Yenny's left. Traore's left. He didn't have a particularly good season. Schneiderlin's leaving. Ninkovic has one more season. Neuenhoff just talks to him leaving. So they've kind of recruited really well, but it seems like a lot of them are already leaving. So it's going to be personally interesting to see how they fill these big roles of these aging players that they've brought in for, 1 or 2 seasons. And to be honest, I don't know how they're going to do that.
Sure, it's really interesting, I think, because we talk a lot about how a lot of teams have massive rebuilds at the end of this season. I feel like this more than most seasons, like almost all teams are looking at a massive rebuild. I can't think of a club that is looking reasonably stable with not that many players coming off of contract or not some major change about to happen. I think maybe the Woo is the one that's closest to being stable. Maybe Adelaide is the most stable, but yeah, it's a pretty wild time, I think, for a lot of the A-League clubs.
Even City, who's had a really consistent spine and core squad for a number of years, I know Mikey's going to talk about it. They got a lot of players leaving, so even this consistent club's going to have a rebuild, and the whole league's going to be real interesting next season. We talk about the merry-go-round, but I feel like it's going to be a really big one.
100%, mate. Next up is me with the Knicks, your honorary Kiwi for this year's pod. So last year they finished 6th. This year they also finished 6th. Last year they were knocked out in the first week of the final. This year where they were also knocked out in the first week of the final. So yeah, pretty par for the course for the Knicks. It did feel like both last year and this year that they had overachieved with, I guess, as always, a pretty challenging set of circumstances for the Knicks. I love that they continued to defy the odds. Some really intelligent recruitment with Kraev, my boy, and Jan Sass. They threatened to turn them into top 4 contenders, but the Knicks' form really trailed off the back half of the season in the final sort of half a dozen games, and that obviously culminated in them getting knocked out in pretty limp fashion in Adelaide. Lowlights was them comically being unable to convert penalties. I think they had missed their first 4 or 5 penalties in the season, which was just bizarre, and like for me, who's not a Knicks fan, just was kind of amusing. They also had a run of wildly unlucky red cards as well. Jan Sass, remember, got sent off in like his debut for basically an accident. And I think everyone was like, yeah, that should be a red, but geez, he's unlucky. And it felt like there was just a bunch of red cards like that. Also, Ollie Sale, Ufuk Talay, and a bunch of other key players announced that they were leaving before the finals had even kicked off. And that really hurt their chances of progressing through the finals and I guess making an impact in the finals. But in terms of highlights, though, I mentioned Kraev and Sass already, but really the big highlight for them this season was Oscar Zavada's signing and form. That guy was just incredible once he signed on, and I think blew a lot of people away with how good he was. Obviously, a big physical presence, great in front of goal, seemed like a good character as well. There has been rumours that he will get signed by a European team. So I guess probably the one potential positive that can come out of that is that maybe the Knicks will be able to get a transfer fee for him. But obviously, stay tuned for more on that space. Stat regarding the Knicks. So I mentioned before, but they missed 4 consecutive penalties. But then on the other side of the penalty coin, some of you might remember that double Ollie Sale save against Sydney in injury time. That was something that I will never ever forget, even though I'm not a Knicks fan. Excuse me. In that game, they were also down to 9 men, which gave them, I think they gave them the win. That was all the way back in January. So pretty wild match, that one, and one that, like, I know a lot of people said, oh, that's definitely peak A-League, but it definitely was definitely up there. In terms of a pass-fail from the squad and manager, look, I mentioned before that I thought that they had overachieved, and so I think you have to say that this is a pretty solid pass from Ufuk Talay, and I don't think any of us really expected that they would make it even into finals. So for them to have made finals again, even if they didn't make much of an impact, I think was positive for them. What to look out for over the off-season, though? Obviously, they need to replace Ufuk Talay, Ollie Sale, Steven Ugarkovic, Clayton Lewis, and a bunch of others, possibly as well as Zavada. They have already replaced Ufuk Talay with his previous assistant. Giancarlo Italiano is replacing him. He's a guy that when he was announced, I went, who? So did a little bit of digging on him this afternoon. He's not an ex-pro footballer. He's actually an ex-lawyer. So I'm calling him now, he's the A-League Sari. Doesn't punch cigarettes like a phenom, though. So obviously he's got that bit that's a bit different. Yeah. He was the one that was instrumental in Cam Devlin coming to the Knicks, because he had coached him when Cam Devlin was 16 at Sutherland Sharks, when he was a youth development coach there. So positive that he's coming with a whole bunch of experience from the Sydney area in NPL, from Sydney FC as well. So I think it will be really interesting to see if he can continue to have the Knicks performing above what many people think is sort of their level. So plenty to keep an eye on there.
Shannon,
and that's
did you
the
have
Knicks.
some other info on Italiano? Looked like you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, Chiefy is a fantastic guy. Honestly, he's very humble. He's very kind, and he's the type of guy who I reckon the players would run headfirst through a brick wall for him. If anyone can get the best out of this Knicks team, it's going to be him. He doesn't have the biggest CV, doesn't have the biggest experience, but he's got the potential to be like a revolutionary manager in the league. And he's one that next season I'd be very surprised if we're not here talking about what an amazing impact he's had and what an amazing season he's had. He's just a fantastic bloke. Cannot speak highly enough about him.
Love a bit of insight from you there.
Yeah.
I'm a Blacktown City boy too.
Yeah, nice. I do think it's interesting whenever like sort of someone from outside of the pro football like player or like ex-player fraternity becomes a manager at the highest level, because like they just have to have worked so much harder to get anywhere even at this kind of level in the A-League, right? Already some people will write him off because he's not an ex-player. Yeah, really curious to see how he goes, because it's all down to just weight of personality, his knowledge of the game, that kind of thing. So yeah.
And a lot of players would write you off too. I still remember hearing stories about Rafa Benitez, like telling players at Real Madrid how to like take a free kick or something like that, and them just going, "What the hell do you know, mate?" Like, so yeah, very interesting.
All right, next up is Shannon with Sydney FC.
Oh God, Sydney FC. Like, it's so hard to talk about them. I talked before we went, on air about how it's going to be hard not to just keep repeating the same thing as we talked about the season before and the season before, because it's the same issues, and if anything, they've just gotten worse and worse. Like, where they finished compared to last season, it's not really relevant because at the end of the day, they didn't win anything, which is what's expected of Sydney FC. They didn't look likely to win anything, which is what's expected of Sydney FC. And in terms of what I've loved about this season from a Sydney FC perspective, I don't want to be too negative, but there's not really much that sticks out to me because they, when they won games, they didn't look overly convincing. The football wasn't very entertaining to watch at times. It kind of just seemed like they were just there. What I hated about the season was, in my opinion, the biggest issue of Sydney FC, the lack of rejuvenation, and no disrespect to guys like Adam Lafondro, who, I think is a fantastic footballer, but you kind of get tired of being a neutral and seeing Sydney FC playing these guys in their mid to late 30s while you see a talented young 18, 19, 20-year-old get 5 or 6 minutes off the bench, knowing that they're tearing it up in NPL New South Wales, they're not getting a chance. And just knowing that one of these guys is going to move on to a team like City or a team like Adelaide or a team like Wanderers and do what Marco Tilio did, they're going to get game time and they're going to show their talents. It just really frustrates me. Highlight of the season for Sydney, winning the derby. Obviously, that was a big win for them. It got them, further in the finals. But the low light of their season was just the lack of any real thing to be positive about. Whether it's the lack of, consistent fan turnout, the lack of belief in the manager from the fans, the lack of any sort of positive showing from the team on the pitch. It just, I'm not trying to put Sydney FC down, but I really feel for their fans because we go from talking about Sydney FC, winning league after league after league, just having this dominant form, and then just not doing anything to build on that, not doing anything to ensure success for the future. I really, really feel for their fans because that must be tough just seeing your team slowly, fade into obscurity year after year after year and it only get worse and nothing being really done about it. You've got talented players, you're not giving them game time, and these older players who are big leaders like Alex Wilkinson, he's now retired. There's a big presence missing from the change room. How are they going to replace him, for example? I will say one positive thing. Jack Rodwell, we took the piss out of him a little bit when he first come to Sydney FC. I think all of us on soccer Twitter, because he was pretty much injured. When he was fit and ready, he pretty much, made such a big difference to Sydney FC. He looked composed. He looked like a bit of a leader. He was a real positive. And Anthony Caceres, he was also a real positive, for them. What to look out for in the off season? I don't want to flog a dead horse for this answer, but any sort of recruitment, any sort of signs of rejuvenation. They've got some good players there. They've got Robert Mack. They've got, Joe Lolly. They've got even, I mentioned Adam Lafondra. He can play a role in the squad still, but they need to start rejuvenating. They need to start bringing some of these good young players before, through. They need to start giving Jaden Kucharski some good game time. They need to start giving Segicic some good game time. They need to start giving Gerd some good game time. They're not all going to be Marco Tilios, but you won't know unless you play them. So that's what I want to look for in the off season. Some signs that Sydney FC are going to start thinking about their future instead of trying to think about right now and try and, duct tape this aging squad together for one more season.
The one for me, Sha, is Tom Hewitt-Bell. He should have been a starting goalkeeper like 3 years ago. And obviously greatest respect to the Grey Wiggle, and I'll love him forever for getting us to a World Cup. But, just criminal to have a player that good sitting on your bench. Maybe that's partly his fault. Maybe he hasn't been ambitious enough. I don't know, because, goalkeeper's a bit different to an outfield player not getting minutes, because obviously only one player can play in a game. Just every time I see that guy come and play, I'm just like, why? What are you doing sitting on the bench for Sydney FC? You could walk.
Has he ever had a bad game? That's the question.
I've never seen him play badly.
So, boys, he did get released, I think, this week by Sydney in the aftermath of their finals loss.
City, surely.
Well, no, I think
that seems to be the way. We'll take their young players and they can take our old players. I think that's how it works.
That's perfect.
I think their new captain, they just got to pick out of 3 old City players.
Well, you've also got Alex Paulson as well, who now looks like he may take over the number 1 spot from Ollie Sale as well at the Knicks. And
fantastic young goalkeeper.
We might see, I guess, a new generation of young goalkeepers coming through, which you remember was only, probably a year ago we were saying, there's no good young Australian goalkeepers. And now we've got, I know Alex Paulson's, I think he's a Kiwi, but still, you get my point though. So that's exciting, I guess, for next
Unless
season.
you're the Roar and you have 2 young ones who are both average.
I will say I do feel really bad for being, so negative about Sydney FC's season and their whole club, but it was really hard for me to honestly try and find a positive without just lying. As I said, Jack Rodwell and a couple of these foreign players they've brought in have done well, but the lack of integration from the youth, I don't know about you boys, but it's tiring to see week in, week out.
Segicic should have lit up this season, and the fact that he has basically played bugger all is horrific. Why have an academy if you're not going to give some of the best young players in Australia a platform? Whether or not you're going to play them long term, or whether or not you're going to sell them potentially, just doesn't make sense. Anyway, we need to keep moving though. Next up is Damo with Perth Glory. Damo, take it away, mate.
Thanks, Tommie. Perth. I mean, we spoke about it before. I will probably start with the stadium. I was pretty scathing of them being at what Macedonia Park looked like, but I really enjoyed watching games from there. It looked good on the TV. It looked full. It sounded like it was loud in there. It's sort of, I think more games in the A-League need to be sent to grounds like that rather than playing in front of 2,500 people at Campbelltown Stadium sort of thing. It's a way to engage people, fans enjoying the game and a bit of atmosphere. We were talking about it during the week. I think it made a big difference. As their season, we all expected them to finish sort of bottom of the league. They didn't really didn't have any really great performances, but they also weren't horrible throughout the year. had some bad games. Obviously, they had some players that really stood up for them. I think it's tough to give them a pass, but it's also tough to give them a fail. You'd say Zadkovic losing his job sort of says that it was a bit of a failure, that project with him anyway. I said in the season preview that things could only really get better for them because last year was so bad. I guess things have got better. They're on the improve, which is a good sign. I said they were going to have to be nervous about having a sort of an unstable season, but they've managed to, stabilize a little bit given everything that went on. So, Zach Duncan was my one to watch at the start of the year. I don't think he lived up to the hype that I wanted him to live up to after coming back from, I think he was in Denmark for a while. But yeah, look, it has to be a pass, I guess you would say, because it was an improvement on last year. So moving forward for them is they've got to keep building. They've got to re-energize their squad. They've got to bring some more players in, a new manager to try and hopefully turn the hopes around. So that's Perth.
Yeah, fair enough. Look, like I'd said sort of early on in the pod, I thought Perth season was going to be really challenging. I think the one thing that whether or not you think their season was a pass or a fail can't be taken away from fans is that just the craziness that was that 4-4 draw with 3 goals scored in injury time. I think that was about a month ago, late April it was, between Perth and Adelaide. Watching that sort of had like I do with a lot of A-League games, sort of got one eye on it, kind of one eye doing other stuff or sort of concentrating on other things. And I remember as that final 15 minutes of the game was happening, it had both eyes just going, what the hell is happening? So that was good times. Alrighty, team. Next up is Colby with the Jets.
Yeah, Newey. Again, another one of those teams that look in a bit similar shape now as they did a year ago. So coming in 10th this season after finishing in 9th the season before. Wasn't a lot to love. I think Jets fans would say their season was pretty disappointing. I loved the sort of re-emergence or emergence, depending on how big of a fan of his you are, of Jack Duncan. I think he was probably one of the only players who can come out of that season who could really say they've had a great season. Player of the season for me. He couldn't even get into the squad at the start of the season and looked like he wasn't going to play. But probably one of the only bright lights in that team. I hated that, they'd lost that spark in attack. They conceded pretty much the same amount of goals as last season, but didn't score. The goals just dropped off a cliff and really dried up. One of the only highlights was that F3 Derby win. They got tonked away to the VUC, who were also struggling. And I think it was the week of their Access All Areas episode where you had the fans yelling at them over the side of the hoardings at the end of the game. That was a low ebb for them, I think, and going out to the Woo in the round of 32 in the Cup. In terms of past fails, the squad, you've got to say that's a fail. Mikutadze, his goals dried up. Piscopo, he got a chance to be the main guy. He wasn't it. O'Neill only played about half the season and underwhelmed. Datsmilia looks like he was going to be a great pickup, but wasn't. And that, I guess, leads on to Pappas. You got to give him a fail too. I don't know what hand he had in that, but I assume he had a pretty big hand in the recruitment. So a lot of that's on him. Players, the players that he picked, if he did pick them, not living up to it. We thought that recruitment looked pretty sharp, but it just didn't work. So, and Pappas sort of came in with a big reputation, having worked under Ange and everything like that. And it looks like now he's might not be as shiny and good of a manager as we thought he was going to be. So he's had 2 full seasons to show us what he's got at the Jets now and pick all these players. He's just not looking very good. And then in terms of the off season, on top of all of this, the Jets have still got their off-field struggles. They're still owned by the league as a whole. We don't know what's happening with their ownership. Pretty tough times post-COVID and everything else for professional football clubs, particularly in Australia. There was talk, I think, probably like 6 months to a year ago about like some consortium coming in for them, but that doesn't look like it's materialized. So yeah, that cloud hangs over them and goes on. So Jets fans, I think, like Brisbane fans and like fans probably Sydney fans as well, can be rightly a little bit disgruntled.
Yeah, pretty disappointing season I felt for the Jets. Like Daniel Pena was so good last season, and everyone sort of thought, oh yeah, I think Piscopo can sort of like follow in his footsteps. But then Mikkel Tadzi just was not the same player, and
I jinxed him. I'm sorry.
I think you might have,
mate. It's all Shannon's fault.
But yeah, like I mean, the Jets at this point sort of have that same stink about them that the Mariners did about 5 years ago, when you sort of thought to yourself, like, how can they turn this around? And like there's a bit of a stinker about the Jets at the moment, sort of on the pitch, off the pitch, and it doesn't seem to matter what they do. Everything just seems a bit off. I sense that it's probably going to be at least another 12 months before things really improve there, unfortunately.
Does that mean Jets are going to be 2028 A-League champions?
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Which retired athlete are they going to sign on first, though?
Yeah, first you got to become a meme, and then you can really get going.
Maybe Logan Paul or someone they can sign on, or one of those TikTokers that the league keeps, floating about.
Get speeding.
Yeah.
Just tell him that Ronaldo's there, and he'll be there in a flash. All right, next up is Damo with Melbourne Victory.
Yeah, Victory. Where do you start? I guess the best place to start is out of all of us here, only one of us didn't predict Melbourne Victory to finish first in the league this season. So they finished 11th, which is, horrible. A massive fail in that part. It's tough to find a highlight in their season. I guess the highlight would probably be they won that derby in maybe it was February was the derby that they won. They won 3-2 against City. That's probably the only highlight really of their season. The low light's an obvious one. We probably don't need to talk about it. It's been spoken about so much. Where to for Melbourne Victory? I guess it's going to be, we talk about change and rebuilds and having to start again. And I think for Victory, it's probably the biggest out of any club at the moment. I was at the Victory and Business lunch on Thursday where Anthony Di Pietro announced his retirement or resignation from the job, which I think he's been there since the start, and he's really turned Victory into, arguably one of the biggest clubs in the country. And that in itself is going to be a huge challenge to see what do they do, what direction do they take the club. Obviously, they've got faith in Popovich somehow to do it. Mikey, you said earlier, through all this, the biggest surprise is that he's still got a job. So I completely agree with that. And I said in the preseason prediction that if they didn't win a trophy, the Victory fans would be turning on Popovich. And I mean, they definitely didn't win a trophy, and they didn't come anywhere near it. And it almost seems to me that Victory fans still believe that Popovich is the person to turn it around. The next season probably could very well be anything like when they finished last and then second the year after. So, they've still got a great squad. They could turn around and just put it together and turn into a really good team next season. So I don't really know what to expect from Melbourne Victory next year, but it'll be interesting.
It still just doesn't make any sense, like looking at that squad and how they finished as low as they did with as few points and performances and good performances as they did, because like that squad is stacked, right? You look at that and you'd say, like, well, you shouldn't need to have a rebuild. Like, there's a lot of players that are still signed on for next season. You think, well, why should I have to rebuild it? It's not like the squad is good, but I mean, maybe it shows what I know about football, maybe. But curiously, Josh Briante has been linked with a move to the Woo, but because he's still under contract, part of the deal was that I think the VUC would still have to pay part of his salary, which like that is like he's their club captain, I'm pretty sure, right? Like how that whole situation can transpire just absolutely blows me away, and shows that whilst I might not think, oh, they don't need a rebuild, right? Like a lot of the pieces are right, they must be identifying that some of the pieces were wrong and must be looking at like a guy like Josh Briante, who I think is probably one of the best sort of A-League standard players in the league, like that he could be possibly moved on to basically a rival, and you end up still paying for part of his salary. Yeah, it just blows me away.
Shannon's perma captain in fantasy.
Yeah.
I've got Josh Briante on my jersey at the moment. I can't really show it without standing up, which is funny.
I heard he was off to the Wanderers
jersey.
Is it the Wanderers or the Woo he's going to, or is it either? It might
be Wanderers.
Yeah, if it's the Wanderers, it's his first. Like, it's his eternal battle to play for every rival of Sydney FC. If he's gone there, like, it's been crazy.
I think that'd make him the first player to have played for both Sydney and both Melbourne teams. Surely, right?
Yeah, I imagine so.
Both?
Yeah.
Are we forgetting that there's 3 in each city now?
You know what I mean. Woo and MacArthur don't count.
Yeah, this is a Socceroos jersey with Briante on it. Like, he was a very, very fringe Socceroo, but he was still a Socceroo a few years ago. He was in the preliminary squad for the 2018 World Cup. And now to hear that he's potentially going to have his own club pay money to send him to a rival club, geez, that mustn't be good for, like, if you're Josh Briante, that mustn't be good to hear that you go from being on the fringes of the Socceroos, playing in Italy and all this stuff. Did really well at Sydney FC. He was a really good midfielder. Now all of a sudden your club's willing to pay to get rid of you. He's like the A-League Daniel Ricciardo.
Well, it screams to me it's some sort of cultural or issue at Melbourne Victory, because he's still a very good player. He's like Tommie said, he's, that sort of benchmark of what is a great, better than average A-League player that could play in any team in the league. But Victory have obviously identified that something is not working and it has to be a cultural problem. They've got the squad. On paper, they're a very good team, but something's not quite right. So, and whether it's he is the problem or they just need to find a way to change the culture of something, that he's got to be one person that needs to go. But yeah, it mustn't feel good, like you said, Shannon, to be put in that kind of situation as a player.
Mm-hmm. All right, boys. Next up is Melbourne City, reviewed by Mikey.
Sorry if there's a bit of a rambling review, but I think it's a bit of a complicated season. It's kind of, we talked earlier about how we felt the A-League season was kind of divided into two. Like, there was before the decision and the derby, and it was after that. And I feel that's especially the case with Melbourne City. I mean, the obvious thing I'll talk about is the managerial change, but there was just a different... It felt like two completely different seasons. It was how we started the season and how we sort of limped towards the finish. We started the season with two pretty big outs. We had Connor Metcalf going to St. Pauli, and we had Roston Griffiths go to Mumbai. Also lost like Taras Gamulka to the Raw, which, worked out spectacularly for everyone, I think. We got a lot of things right. I think the transfers in, like I said, we retained the bulk of our squad, but the players we added, I think it was all adding to the squad this season. There was no real big outs or rebuilds going on. We brought in Callum Talbot, Valon Berisha on loan from France, Richard van der Ven, and Thomas Lamb.
Gigi De Bruyne.
Yeah, And I really felt like players like Van der Ven and Lamb gave City something that we've sort of lacked since we lost Luna and Craig Noon from the squad. I think last season, even though it was back to back now, I think last season compared to now, I think we're a better squad. And there's a lot of things for that. Like, for instance, we brought in a goalkeeper coach, and I think Tom Glover is back to, as good as he can be. Like, it's last season compared to now. I think Glover was responsible for us dropping many, many points that season. And to watch him now, like, even last night, shipping 6 goals, it could have been more if not for Tommy Glover.
He was City's best player in the grand final, right? Which shows how bad they were.
He was the only player that didn't embarrass themselves.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and you say that after shipping 6 goals, so that does speak volumes about last night. But I'm not here to talk about last night. I'm here to talk about season 22-23,
which includes last night.
Don't remind him.
I think we continued to bring through and solidify our kind of youth. Like, people have complained about Tillio not getting minutes or Geordie Boss not getting minutes. They've really come through again this season. Like, Tills and Boss starting. Boss is starting ahead of Jamison, like the captain, and I think that really speaks volumes about how, if you trust the process and we're bringing the players through, where you can kind of go. And like, we're going to lose a lot of these players, but I think that's all part of the parcel of kind of, if you want to develop youth and you want to help Australian football, this is how you do it. A lot went wrong. I think our adaptability, we can talk about last night, we can talk about last grand final. I think there's a continual theme of, if our play isn't working, we don't really change. We just keep doing the same thing. We keep trying to cross the ball. We keep trying to, it didn't work last night. Again, it's very raw at the moment. But
plan B is do plan A better.
Yeah, and that was a real staple of PK's style of play. But I think it did transition a bit into Rado ball. So look, I think our transfers in were great. I think players like Matthew Leckie became like one of the best players in the league, like we talked about earlier with the Johnny Warren. Without injury, I think he would have been a shout to get that. And it was so evident when he wasn't in the squad, when Leckie wasn't in the squad, when Richie Van der Ven wasn't in the squad, how much we suffered for that. So look, overall, if you're going to win the league, I know all the work was done early in the season. We had such an insurmountable lead that no matter how much we froze, no matter how many times we kind of gave up leads or had frustrating draws to Newcastle at home, it didn't matter because we'd already done the work early in the season. So I'm going to give a tick to PK. I'm going to give a tick to Rado. But yeah, I think it's a good season. If you win the league by some distance, it's a good season.
Mikey, Rado's still got 2 more years left on his contract. Do you reckon he'll see out those 2 years?
I think he will. And that's another thing about the we can talk about City football, whatever, but there's a clear pathway with these type of things. Like, Patrick Isnorbo went from a player to coaching the youth and coaching our W League team and into the men's team. And I think there's definitely something to be said about keeping things in-house. They certainly have a way they like to play, and I think that's certainly a way to do it. Eric Monbear was already in the system when he came over. PK has gone to another CFG club.
So what you're saying is Dario is going to be the next manager?
Yeah, the father, the son.
Keep it in the family.
Keeping it in the family. Yeah, So I think there's definitely. I don't think they made that decision on a whim or it was a panic. I think there was no need to sign him up if they didn't want to sign him up. So, yeah, I think he will see out the contract, and I think there'll be more success coming his way.
Fair enough. All right. Thanks, Mikey. Next up is me with MacArthur. So last year, MacArthur finished 7th. This year, they finished dead last, but they did win the Australia Cup. So, you take the good with the bad. What I loved and hated about them this season, look, they won a trophy. So, yeah, like that's a positive. but I've got to say, I just hated the vibe around this team, this club, this season. I felt like they were negative, they were unprofessional. There was that it just seemed spiteful, like in that clip where Glenn Moss was slagging off Arzani on camera in the access all areas video. And then you got the now infamous pub team reference that Dwight York made regarding Bulls management selling off striker
Allegedly.
Anthony Carter. Yeah, look, I'm taking that as fact, like where he so Anthony Carter was being sold to Portuguese team Oliveirense hours before a match and not telling the player all the coaching staff until a couple of hours before the game was due to start, which like that is just like pub team stuff. So yeah, anyway. Highlights, not many highlights, but low light was for me just Arzani kind of not necessarily making a lot of progress. What else? Davila's ACL injury was pretty grim, I thought. And like just the whole story around Davila was just pretty heartbreaking, really. The story of his wife passing away and the associated access all areas was like just some really hard TV and hard viewing to watch. But just I really appreciated how well they told that story, with respect and feeling and honesty, and it made for fantastic content, but just a horrible story, unfortunately.
Just quickly, sorry, Tommie. Shout out to the Bulls physio who ran something like, I think it was like 1,000 kilometers or something in order for charity for Davila's wife, and Craig Noon also ran like a couple of 100 kilometers the day after a match, also for the charity for his wife. So just brilliant work from those two. They raised some money for a good cause.
That is a very good shout. That was pretty late on in the season. I think with only pretty late on in the season. So that was a great story. Apparently the guy ran, so he was meant to run from like the northern beaches of Sydney down to Wollongong. And he was meant to run, I think it was like 100 kilometers, but ended up running like 15 Ks further because like Google Maps gave him the ring around. Which is both hilarious, but also just very on brand for the McBulls.
I've been knackered after 100 meters, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. I feel tired just talking about it. Pass or fail from the squad and or manager. I thought it was a fail from a pretty decent squad, a squad that Sha said that should be finishing top two. It was a pretty shallow squad, and there were a couple of players that came from NPL who I thought did well, but still, this felt like a very two-speed squad. I didn't think they were bad enough to justify finishing last, though. So definitely thought that was very indicative of the vibes around the club as a whole. In terms of what to look out for over the off season. I noticed Jacob Burns has left. I'm not sure if he was in like an academy or sort of technical director role, or if he was an assistant or what. So they're going to have to replace some of the coaching staff. I'm also not convinced that Miles Stajowski is the man to lead them forward and onto sort of greener pastures. But, I said the same thing about Ruben Zadkovic, so I guess we'll just have to wait and see there. And also the club has to do something to sort of engage with the local area a little bit more. I think every club has made some progress in terms of engaging with the local area and building their crowds, but the McBulls are still horrific. So hopefully they can do some work in that space. Next up is going to be hilariously Mikey doing Central Coast.
Yeah, funny one that, isn't it?
Hey, you picked him, mate.
I did. I don't think anyone expected the Mariners in the grand final, maybe. I don't know if we can check the tapes on that. But the Central Coast Mariners, last season finishing 5th in the league, this season 2nd in the league, and that was like quite a race with them in Adelaide. So, I mean, yeah, Central Coast Mariners have had a stellar season, and if Melbourne City, if we lost a few more games, I think the Mariners the Mariners are definitely a shout to win the plate. They were superb all season. They were really one of the feel-good teams, along with Adelaide. That the neutrals would just love to watch week in and week out. Highlight is obviously winning the Sydney Super Cup last night. That's a huge one. It's the first silverware in 10 years. It's also
What was
their
the score in that game again? Sorry, I forgot.
Who?
I missed it.
I didn't see. It's their first silverware in 10 years, and it's also their highest place in the league in those 10 years. So 2013 was the last time they finished second in the league. So, I mean, I'll be honest, when they first appointed Montgomery, I thought it was a very short-term kind of filling the gap kind of appointment there. I didn't think he was in charge of the youth team briefly, I think. And look, I really did think it was one of those see out the season until we can find a better manager type appointments. But he seems to be made for the Central Coast Mariners. Like the stuff they've done these past couple of seasons have just been superb. Like, and look, we're going to talk about last night, the way they played last night, like to not stop when they've clearly already got the bag. Like they're played and they're drilled insanely. And they've really got a good mix of youth and those kind of veteran players because Sydney Super Cup. That's right. But it was quite a big job this season because there was quite a few outs. Like we had Birigidi, Bazanik, Tommie, Kyrales, Urania, Matt Simon, Garen Cool going out.
Oof.
Like that's a bulk of your squad right there going out the door. I mean, bringing in Aquilina, albeit briefly, Wenzel Halls, Thea Harris, Tullio, who, here's a fun fact, I had no idea he was 25. I thought he was closer to 30. But here we are.
I thought he was in his mid-30s.
Me
That's
too.
what I thought. 25. 25. Vukovic coming in, big one to replace Birigidi, who went to Dundee and is struggling. Silvera, and look, player of the season has to be Jason Cummings. I'm sorry to anyone else. I don't know if anyone disagrees with me, but I mean, golden boot, golden assists. I don't know what you call that. And
golden shower.
Look, yeah.
Oh gosh.
Feed the dog and he will come.
I think looking ahead to next season, I think we got to expect another kind of mass exodus. Like I mentioned, the outs for this season. I think when you've got the resources and you're the size of the Mariners, the reality is that you're not going to be able to retain a squad that performs as well as they have. And we've already touched on, players like Cummings off to India. I think we've got a few more going out.
Triantis to Sunderland.
Triantis, off to Sunderland. I mean, Vukovic is 38. I don't know how many more times he's going to go around. But
surely we're just waiting for him to sober up before he can announce his retirement, right?
I mean, yeah, well, good luck.
When's the next Qual sibling coming in? Surely.
10 Koals at Western Sydney Wanderers. So, maybe we'll have a third Qual in the A-League next season. Sorry, Mikey, can I just quickly give a bit of praise to Denny Vukovic? He come into the season and, to be honest, big expectations. Had a really bad start to the season. I don't think anyone will disagree. I don't think he would disagree. And he had all that controversy about him getting selected in the Socceroos, which, it's not his decision. He doesn't select himself, but he copped a lot of hate and vitriol after having such a bad start to the season. Must have been mentally tough for him. But coming back from the World Cup, he, just brought his game back 5-10 years to what he was, at the top of his game when he was at Sydney FC or Perth Glory. He was outstanding in the second half of the season. And I think he's really changed a lot of people's minds on him. And he's had a fantastic end to the season. So to overcome all that, I just, I feel like he deserves a bit of praise.
Yeah, absolutely there. I mean, the shelf life of goalkeepers, I don't even understand how that works. I think you can play till you're 50 nowadays. So I'm not sure he may be an out. I don't know if he will. I mean, who knows? I'm not sure, but the Mariners have had a fantastic season, and I think next season, despite the outs they're undoubtedly going to have, I trust Nick Montgomery to build just as good a squad for next season. Yep.
That's
How do you
Sheffield
replace
United
Cummings?
and sorry,
on
that's
a Mariners budget? How do you replace Cummings? Do you reckon any suggestions of a player from you boys?
Ross McCormack again.
Yeah, it just seems to be whoever someone knows, right? Like someone knows someone, or so you've seen some player on TV and they just DM them on Instagram or something. It just like there just doesn't seem to be any kind of sophistication in this league to how these processes work, unless someone tells me otherwise. I feel like I've heard so many stories about how these players are approached, and I used to think there were like. Each team had like scouts and the sophisticated network, but it doesn't really seem that way.
I've got no suggestions unless Jamie Vardy wants a severe pay cut.
Ooh. I reckon Jamie Vardy wouldn't mind living on the Central Coast versus slogging it out in the championship again.
Fair shout.
That's a good shout.
Alrighty, thanks, Mikey. Second last one up is Colby with Brisbane Roar.
All right, I'm going to keep this brief. Yeah, no, I'm not going to rant, but 8th this season after 11th last season. Like in theory, that's an improvement. Yeah, Tommie thinks we've got the manager/managers of the season. After one got sacked. The only thing I really loved was beating the Buck on the last day of the season to avoid the wooden spoon. That's how good of a season we had. I hated that.
Finals.
Oh God, I hated that. Charlie Austin came in and then left early. Like, if you've got family reasons,
bad signing,
whatever. But like, yeah, it looked like a good signing on paper. With a bit more time, he was what we needed. He was the exact profile of player we needed. And with a bit more time, who knows what could have worked out. But as it was, he left early. I hated that. I hated that we had a midfielder yet again, was our top scorer or second to top scorer. I hated that we appointed an amateur as an interim coach. I don't know if Nick Green, full respect to him, has his badges or anything. Yeah, we lost to a Nazi team in the cup. It's just
not see that happening.
Yeah, it's not great.
Oh God!
But I think I would still, having said all of that, give the squad a pass, because the squad is the squad. Like it's not a very good squad, and they performed not very good. So what do you expect? Like Jay O'Shea had a great season, my boy. Henry Hoare, he was starting to come good again at the end of the season. Aldred and Truan, I think they played well. Jordan Courtney-Perkins, he'll be a sad out. I think he was starting to develop quite well. Gamulka, I think, was a good addition and needed in the midfield. But yeah, just not a great squad. And what is anyone surprised we didn't perform that well? Manager fail for me, definitely. Moon came in with a mandate, a couple of years ago, said he was going to, put up a team of all this Queensland talent. And then season after season, we just couldn't retain any of that talent. And the ones we did retain, we couldn't do anything with, or Moon couldn't develop them. So it wasn't good enough. And I'm not even going to go into all the off-field and managerial and club controversies, because it's just, I've said enough on that over the years. But in terms of the manager, still just sticking on that, like the visa recruitment again, I don't know, if that's fully Warren Moon's decision. Maybe he didn't have full say in all of our visa players and stuff, but to the extent he did, he didn't get those right either. So like, he didn't get the local players right, didn't develop them, didn't retain them, and didn't get the visa players right, and didn't make the right decisions and play the right kind of football to get results with what we ended up did have. So it was just a fail all around.
Like manager of the year material, does it?
No, psyched. I'm psyched for the Ross Aloisi era. Oh God, like we're gonna be fighting people in the tunnels again.
Honestly, give Ross a chance. Like,
I'm going to reserve judgment
in Ross.
And apparently, it was always said among Brisbane Roar fans when he was assistant to John that Ross was the actual, had the tactical nous, and Aloisi was just the sort of smooth talker to the cameras. So I will reserve judgment, but he's a bit unhinged. Let's be real.
Here's a bit of insight for you. If Brisbane Roar fans are complaining about Ross Aloisi, no disrespect, but insider knowledge from me working with the Sri Lankan national team, their coach is an Aussie, Alagic, was in advanced talks with Brisbane Roar. No disrespect, but not exactly who you'd be, riding as a top class manager for an A-League side. So Ross Aloisi, a very, very good, addition compared to what they could have had.
So you're saying it's better the Aloisi,
Yeah.
Good.
Who would
Okay.
you say is player of the season for you, Colby, out of Brisbane?
Jay
Roar?
O'Shea, without a doubt. Yeah, Jay
100%.
O'Shea, for sure.
I do think like an underrated player over the last few years at the Raw has been Tom Aldred, and the fact that he's leaving now, I think, is quite a big hole, just like professionally, positionally, leadership wise. I think is a big loss. He's been underrated, I think, as far as players in the league go the last few years. Just a shame he's played in a pretty trash
It's
league.
it's a huge leadership void to fill. I mean, you've got obviously Jack Hingett's been, he's the sort of he'll be the the 2IC, and obviously he's been around at the club for a long time. Sri Lanka's best player, Sri Lanka's finest. But he's just not in the same mold in terms of Aldred, and he's on he's on the downward in terms of his career and where it's going. He's been a great servant to the club, but yeah, it's not the same as Aldred. So there will be a big void there for sure, Tommie, on field and leadership.
Fair enough. All right, last but not least, Damo is now going to cover Adelaide United for us. Damo, take it away.
Yep, thank you. Look, all in all, I think Adelaide had a very good season. Obviously, they had the Johnny Warren medalist, my boy, World Cup Craig, did really well. I think they'd be really disappointed with the back end of their season. I think they finished the season, was it 4 games in the league without a win until like the final day or something like that. And then obviously they lost in the finals to the Mariners. So disappointing back end of the season. I think it's similar to what happened last year. They fell off towards the back end of the year. But look, they've got the squad to be up around there. And I don't know what it is that needs to click for Adelaide to just finally get that sort of little bit better than they are. Highlights for the season, they had a couple of really big wins. I think they put 5 past Wellington and then 5 past someone else earlier in the year. What a lot of goals. So that's probably their highlight for Adelaide. But I think they also had the best defense in the league. So, Carl Viet, credit to him. He won manager of the season. Definitely deserved it. And sorry, you can hear my son just laughing at my review in the background. Love that. Thanks, mate.
Just mate, that it sounds like he thinks that you're reviewing Western United. All I can hear is talk about woo.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Look, I don't know what really can be said about Adelaide. It's a pass for their season, but I think it's sort of a fail in terms of where they probably have the potential to be. Having a few young players come through, like Iran Kunda, is just a story in itself. We love to see that. Probably won't be around next year unless he gets loaned back to the club, which is probably what they're trying to look for, is someone that can loan him back. But they've also got a couple of other really good
Johnny
young players. Yeah, Johnny Yule got a bit of game time. Needs to learn how to shoot, though. He hits it over the bar every time he has a shot at goal. Bernardo is another player that didn't really feature this year. I had massive raps on at the start of the year. He got some injuries, and then so look, that's another young player that they'll have coming through. And as Adelaide do, they've always got some 15, 16, 17-year-old that'll come in next year that no one's ever heard of, and he'll have a great season as well. So for next year, Adelaide, more of the same, I would say. And yeah, hopefully they'll be pushing on for a grand final. I think they would want, especially with Craig Goodwin still sort of the peak of his powers.
Just need someone to finish off those chances he creates. That's literally all I need. And someone that's not George Blackwood.
And we were talking about this at the start of the year. If Adelaide had a 9, they probably would be the best team in the league. And I was thinking at the back end of the World Cup, there was those couple of Aussies that were overseas trying to get a spot at the World Cup, and they might come back to Australia. And it was Adelaide that seemed the most likely. And there's still a few of those players, although Mitch Duke's now gone to another club in Asia. Adam Taggart's probably still looking for a club.
He's in Perth.
Sorry, not Adam Taggart. Yes, no, it was Adam Taggart. He came, and I thought Adelaide made perfect sense for him, and he went to Perth, and that made no sense. So, yeah, I don't know. They need a 9. It's not Ibusuki, and it's not Blackwood, who I don't know how he's still stealing a wage as a footballer.
Thief.
Perfect example of a national second division level talent, I think. Boys, in terms of the players coming off of the Adelaide production line, you've got Luka Jovanovic, who I think won a Young Player of the Month award this year. Musa Toure, obviously still kicking around as well. Panache Madanya. He made a couple of appearances off the bench as like a wing back. Ethan
Is that the
Alexis,
Zimbabwean-born guy?
possibly. Hold on.
Yeah, Shannon's nodding.
Apparently, he's not even a right back either, so that's even more impressive how he slotted in.
Yeah, I mean, he was often coming on when they were either chasing the game or seeing out the game. So I see that. I think he plays as like a forward, like normally. But I mean, not shocked to see someone be playing in a different position once they progress to senior football, though. The other one was Ethan Allegich as well, who sort of was getting more minutes this year, but still very, very young. And then probably the biggest breakthrough was Alexander Popovic, who had a really, really good season, played a lot of minutes in the absence of, I can't remember who their injured centre back was. I can't remember if it was Ben Warland or Lockie Barr. It was one of those two was injured for a while.
Ansel as well.
Yeah. So, like just straight up, there's like 5 young players plus Bernardo who didn't play very much. So just heaps of opportunities. And you know that a couple of those young players are going to be getting more minutes again next year. So that's all goodness as far as Adelaide goes.
They're like Bizarro Sydney. They're just the opposite of Sydney. They're everything that Sydney should be without the silverware. I mean, they've won recently, in the past 10 years, but still.
Even players they brought in late in the season, like Jay Barnett, he did really well. Luke Duzel, he looked really well. Like, as you mentioned, Jovanovic, he apparently turned down a call up from Serbia. I don't know if it was their seniors or their youth team, but what an amazing talent line they have just coming through at Adelaide. And they're just an exciting team to watch, in my opinion. I love when an Adelaide United game's on TV because I know more often than not I'm going to get good quality football compared to watching someone like a Bulls.
Goodwin quality football? World Cup Craig, baby.
And like I love that we talk about them giving young players opportunities, and it's not all the likes of Aaron Kunda that are playing 15 games and then are getting signed and going overseas. Like Louis Dorigo is 22 and has played 100 A-League games. Like that is fantastic, right? So like that is the kind of thing that we talk about when we say that we want like young talent to be promoted, right? Players need the opportunity to make mistakes and to improve their game, and you're seeing that with I think Louis Dorigo, who look I'm a fan of. He might have a bit of a limited ceiling, but you have to give players the opportunity to grow and develop if you're going to see sort of how high their ceiling is. But look, boys, that's probably a good place to finish up, though. Obviously, covered a lot of ground there, reviewed all 12 A-League teams, talked about the A-League Grand Final. Probably be a little bit remiss of me if I didn't give a shout-out to the boys at Adelaide Blue Eagles. They asked me if I'd give them a shout-out on the pod, and, I'm a sucker for a request for a shout-out, so shout-out to them.
All man's Adelaide City.
100%, right? But yeah, look, really enjoyed our A-League review podcast. As always, one of my favorites, and I hope you listeners have all enjoyed it. So we're going to take a little short break before we're going to crack straight on with our Premier League season review pod as well, but which you'll be able to tune into as a separate podcast. But looking forward to more football in the future. Ciao.
Salute.
See.